Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this little subject in this little video, all in all, that I found very particularly interesting. I'm not necessarily going to review this video, I'm only going to talk about it for somewhat of a short period. The video may be only about 10 to 15 minutes long, but the reason why I thought that I would talk about it is because, of course, when it comes to a certain amount of narratives, especially about certain fighters, the majority of the time, the narratives that are going to be out there about the certain fighters, it's usually going to be the more popular ones. And there is no more popular boxer in this world of boxing today, in the sport of boxing today. There is no bigger cash cow than that of Mr. Soul Canelo Alvarez. And of course, this video and a series of videos that I found very particularly interesting, not only by Dante's Boxing Nation, but Boxing Ego and a certain amount of these other channels. And of course, they've been trying to allege for a very, very long time that Canelo Alvarez has avoided top tier black fighters. And that's not me saying that Canelo Alvarez maybe has not maneuvered around a little bit here and there. But the majority of the time, when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez's career, especially within the past several years, there really hasn't been another fighter that has as consistently, in my view, fought top tier competition after repeated champion after repeated champion after repeated champion. And I understand that when we take a look at Canelo Alvarez's recent resume, that he hasn't fought either Demetrius Bivol or Jamal Charlo. But my thing overall with that is that even though I think Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade, even though I think that they're very, very decent fights, I don't really think that they're much more above some of the other fighters that Canelo Alvarez has fought. Now, of course, certain people would disagree, but at the end of the day, if you're a person that is going to go on the narrative that, well, I want Canelo Alvarez to face Jamal Charlo, I want him to face Demetrius Bivol Andrade or David Benavidez, and if you're a person that is going to go on the narrative like what Dante's Boxing Nation or Boxing Ego overall, what they always try to say, then I think that you need to be consistent. And that overall, what you need to say is that we don't want to see Dimitri Bivol. We don't want to see these fights. We want to see Canelo Alvarez face Jamal Charlo. You know, once again, I had a commentator, I believe, who's actually recently subscribed to my channel. And like I said, we all respectfully disagree here and there. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I have to respectfully disagree with this commentator. And basically what he said in one of my videos is that he said, oh, well, I can't disagree with Dante necessarily because Dante, basically all he wants is Canelo Alvarez to face elite fighters. And the fighters before he fought Caleb Plant were nothing but B or C grade fighters. And I can't agree with that. Because once again, when you take a look at Callum Smith was a person that not only was a champion, he was the Ring Magazine champion. He had a knockout over Rocky Fielding, who I get it is not a high grade fighter, but at least was someone who was undefeated at the time. And Callum Smith ended up knocking him out within one round. So it's not like he had this, big, huge blood draw with him. He had overall basically a dominant performance over him. He knocked him out within one round. And on top of that, he knocked out George Groves, who in my opinion is not necessarily someone that is, all-time great, but he is someone that was a decent fighter at the time, coming off of a win over Christian Bang Jr. and Canelo Alvarez. He was able to dominate that version of Callum Smith. So it is what it is. Billy Joe Saunders, once again, a lot of these people, they praised Billy Joe Saunders once upon a time, but then when it came to Canelo Alvarez fighting them, they basically tore him down. And it was the same thing with Caleb Plant. Like I said, if you don't believe me, go ahead and take a look at my video that I posted, I believe, about a week ago where I said new media has been exposed. And it was a video overall by, I believe, another channel. And it was Aki TV, excuse me, a couple years prior saying that Caleb Plant had great athletic ability, great boxing ability, and that he said that was the reason why Canelo Alvarez was avoiding him. But then as soon as Canelo Alvarez fought Caleb Plant, Aki TV was not satisfied. So basically what that has proved over time is that these guys, they're not really going to be happy with whoever Canelo Alvarez fights. Now, once again, if you're a person all in all that says, well, Canelo Alvarez does need to face Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez in order to prove somewhat of his greatness, I wouldn't necessarily have a huge problem with that. But like I said, for those of us that are logical and objective and we actually know what we're watching, I'm sorry, but you can go in this narrative all you want to about how Dimitri Bivol is a European fighter and blah, 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 blah. We can talk about that all we want to, but at the end of the day, like I said, if you're a person that, just thinks that these European fighters are trash or so below some of these other black fighters and Mexican fighters, then stop giving certain fighters like Andre Ward so much credit in their career. Stop giving him so much credit because the best fighters that Andre Ward ever beat in his career were nothing but European fighters or Caucasian fighters. He was almost on a strictly European and Caucasian diet. Now, don't get me wrong, he did defeat one very great black fighter in his career, in Chad Dawson, but does anyone really take a look at Chad Dawson as a top 50 fighter of all time? No, not really. It just is what it is. The biggest one of Andre Ward's career was Sergey the Crusher Kovalev. Now, I bet you overall they give credit overall over a European fighter, when it comes to that. So it depends. Like I said, you have to really take a look at the fighter, determine, in my view, if they're a very decently great fighter. And I'm sorry, but Dimitri Bivol, he is a bigger threat to Canelo, in my view, than what a Jamal Charlo or Andrade or Benavidez ever would be. I would maybe see some of the appeal of Andre just in terms of a threat, just because he is tall and lengthy, and he does have decent boxing ability when he's at his best. But in terms of Charlo and David Benavidez, I'm sorry, I just don't see anything that they really bring to the table. I mean, that's not me saying that they don't bring anything to the table, but in terms of actually beating that of a Canelo Alvarez, do I see them, just beating Canelo? No, personally, I don't. But, of course, that's just my analysis. What I will say is this: if Canelo Alvarez wants to be remembered on the top 10 level of all time, more than likely he's not only going to have to defeat Dimitri Bivol and unify 175 pounds, which is something that Dante's Boxing Nation said that Canelo Alvarez should do, because he said that was a very great division. All of a sudden, now that Canelo Alvarez looks like he may do that, all of a sudden, basically, what is he saying? Oh, well, Canelo Alvarez, the only reason why he's picking those fights is because he really doesn't want to face the black fighters. So basically, you're not going to give him credit either way. And that's why these channels are so obnoxious to watch. It's like, if you're going to say one thing, 1 minute, you have to try to have some consistency the next. And these channels are consistent. They're not consistent whatsoever, because whoever Canelo Alvarez fights, they're just not going to like it anyway. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not me saying that I would not want to see the Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez fights. Of course, I would love to see those fights. And if you're a person that says, you know what, I'm not going to accept any other fight that Canelo Alvarez takes unless it's the Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez fight, no problem. But then keep that same energy. Dante's Boxing Nation, he never does that. Basically, what he does is that he kind of, overall does whatever he can to tear down Canelo Alvarez. When there was rumors overall about him possibly facing Jamal Charlo, what did he say? He basically said, oh, well, Canelo, he's taking the fight because this is Jamal Charlo's worst performance. He only fights people coming off their worst performance. Okay, no problem. So then you shouldn't even mind if Canelo Alvarez isn't going to fight him next, because Dimitri Bivol has looked more impressive at this point in time than what Jamal Charlo has. Isn't that correct? So that would give Jamal Charlo a little bit more time to straighten up his career. And Dimitri Bivol, Dante's Boxing Nation, by his own admission, said that Dimitri Bivol was one of the only two boxers that he gave overall a 100% chance to beat Canelo Alvarez. He said that Canelo Alvarez has absolutely no chance to defeat Dimitri Bivol whatsoever. But now that the fight is happening, what do we hear Dante's Boxing Nation say? All of a sudden, his energy is changing up a little bit. All of a sudden, he's starting to say in his videos that, oh, more than likely that fight's going to end up either Canelo knocking out Bivol or catching him with some more Bivol. Maybe he'll win by decision. What do you mean? I thought you said that Canelo Alvarez had no chance against him. So, like I said, Dante, he can spew all this bullshit all he wants to. You can tell if you're intelligent enough, and if you know how to read people, and if you listen and catch them in their own lies. You can tell all in all when someone's full of shit. And there's no offense against Dante's Boxing Nation, and I'm sure about these other channels, but these channels are full of shit. Because when he was about to face Jamal Charlo, what did Boxing Ego and Dante's Boxing Nation say? Oh, I really don't even want to see the fight. The fight should have happened so long ago. Jamal Charlo's not the same fighter. But then when Canelo Alvarez faces Dimitri Bivol, what did they say? Oh, well, why aren't you facing Jamal Charlo? So like I said, these channels, they're not to be trusted. And that's not me saying that, maybe Canelo Alvarez eventually would not want to face Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez. But I have to give Canelo Alvarez a lot of credit for facing someone like Dimitri Bivol, because in my opinion, Dimitri Bivol, he is someone that is a much bigger threat, not even just a little bit more of a threat, a much bigger threat than what a Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez ever will be and ever would be. It just is what it is. And I know a lot of people would disagree, but I just thought that I would talk about this. Listen, what I will say is this. Is there such a thing, all in all? Because Eddie Reynoso, of course, said, and he was talking about Oscar Valdez's sake, I believe, against Shakur Stevenson. He said, all in all, that basically that the African-American style is one of the most difficult styles overall to face. And he is, in a way, correct. A lot of these African-American fighters are very, very intelligent. They're very decently slick. They have great movement, great footwork. A lot of the most dominant fighters in boxing, 90% of the time, they usually are the African-American style. I just don't think that there's any, debating that. But at the end of the day, if we just take a look at things always like, well, if Canelo, if he beats a European fighter, then, that's obviously not as big as a win over a black fighter. We have to take things into context. Is Jamal Charlo really someone that is better and greater than that of a Dimitri Bivol? I'm sorry, I don't personally think so. Is someone like a David Benavidez really better in terms of a skill set? Is he really better than that of a Dimitri Bivol? I don't think so. It just is what it is. I'm sorry, but once again, and I never get answers to these questions because I always ask logical and objective questions because I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this sport. If you truly believe that David Benavidez and Jermall Charlo are the better fights, not only in terms of a monetary perspective, but also in terms of a skills perspective, like I said, name me one category that they beat Dimitri Bivol in. Go ahead, name me some. Can they beat him in punching power? I mean, Dimitri Bivol, of course, hasn't got a knockout in a little bit, but Dimitri Bivol, from what I've heard, especially from certain sparring stories, he does have more power than that of a Jermall Charlo or overall that of a David Benavidez. And I'm sorry, but it's not like David Benavidez and Jermall Charlo. It's not like they just have bone-crushing power. They have very decent power when it comes down to it. But would I say that their power is really above Dimitri Bivol's? No, not really. Do I think that they're better athletes than Dimitri Bivol? No, I don't. Do I think all in all that, they have better, that they have better hand speed? Do I think that they have better feet? No. Do I think that they're bigger than Dimitri Bivol? No. Do I think all in all that they have better boxing IQ? No. Do I think all in all that, they have as good as feet, foot speed, or footwork as Dimitri Bivol? No, I don't. Do I think that they have the defensive responsibility or the head movement that Dimitri Bivol has? No, I don't. Do they even have the resume that a Dimitri Bivol has? No, I don't think they have that either. Yes, Dimitri Bivol has only won one belt in his career, but let's also take a look at some of the guys that he has defeated. He defeated Jean Pascal, who was a multiple-time champion in his career. Dimitri Bivol was able to embarrass him. He was able to embarrass Joe Smith Jr. and also Sullivan Barrera, who I don't believe has ever been a champion, but all in all, a decent contender. Who does Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez really have in their resume to determine that they're really that much higher than Dimitri Bivol? Now, don't get me wrong. This is not me stating that, because they haven't really fought anyone that's A grade, I don't want to see the fights happen. That's not what I'm saying. My point directly is, if you think all in all that Canelo Alvarez is just taking this fight because apparently he thinks that Jermall Charlo and David Benavidez are so much tougher than Dimitri Bivol, where's the evidence for that? Where's the evidence for that? Because what really makes Dimitri Bivol lesser fighters than those guys? There's nothing that you can really claim that overall that he's lesser than those fighters in any category. He has better wins, in my opinion. When it comes down to it, in my view, he's a clearly more skilled fighter. He's bigger. He's a better athlete. You guys overall should be jumping up and down when this fight is happening. But all of a sudden that the fight is happening, they're starting to change their energy. Once again, I can somewhat respect an opinion. If you're going to be the same guy that says, well, I need to see the David Benavidez and Jermall Charlo fights happen, and I'm not going to be satisfied until those fights happen, no problem with that. But if you're a person that basically tries to use anyone's name, which is what Dante's Boxing Nation does, and you can look at my prior videos if you don't believe me. I can even post them in the link down below. If you don't believe me, I can post specific videos where you can tell that his energy changed, now from what it was months earlier. I can tell you, okay, I can show you videos. I have, breadcrumbs, as Ego would say. So like I said, we'll see overall where that goes. But if you're curious, I can post certain videos that I posted in the past down in the comment section below. And I can prove it. Because Dante's Boxing Nation, one day basically, he'll say that Canelo should take this fight. Then maybe he'll possibly take that fight, and then he'll criticize it. So like I said, these guys, they don't really care overall who Canelo Alvarez faces next. Like I said, they're not going to give him credit. They're not going to give him credit because they don't want someone like that as a number one pound-for-pound fighter. I don't think that's what a certain amount of people understand. Because even when Lomachenko, when he was facing almost pretty much everyone out there, when he was calling out Mikey Garcia, Guillermo Rigondeaux, certain stuff like that, and he ended up overall facing Guillermo Rigondeaux, beating those guys. They were trying to overall degrade Vasily Lomachenko as the number one pound-for-pound fighter. So it's very obvious what their main objective is. They don't want someone overall besides a black fighter, more than likely an American black fighter, as the number one pound-for-pound. That's what their objective is. That's what their objective is. Because at the end of each video, what do you always hear Dante's Boxing Nation say? That's why Canelo Alvarez isn't the number one pound-for-pound fighter. That's his main problem. That's what his problem is. His problem isn't what, he truly believes that Canelo is just facing repeated C-grade fighters. He doesn't truly believe those fighters are C-grade fighters. If he truly believed overall that those fighters are C-grade fighters, he wouldn't say all in all that the potential of a Caleb Plant versus Jermall Charlo fight that's happening next is a big fight. He wouldn't have said that Demetrius Andrade versus Billy Joe Saunders fight, when that was possibly going to happen, that was a big fight. He wouldn't have once upon a time praised Callum Smith. Dante doesn't truly believe that these fighters are C-grade fighters. But he has to put that out there because his argument, basically at the end of the day, his agenda is we have to strip this dude of his number one pound-for-pound ranking. How can we do this? How can I spread certain narratives to basically tear down his career? It's basically like certain people in the media, like Isaiah Thomas or Shannon Sharp, when they try to tear down Michael Jordan. They understand that no one's going to really be on his level, at least at the current moment in time, so they have to try to bring Michael Jordan down, because that's the only way that you're going to have to put someone above him. So it is what it is, because you can't deal with 5 MVPs, 6 Finals MVPs, 6 Finals wins, and all in all, Defensive Player of the Year and all that. Canelo Alvarez right now, I mean, I don't want to compare him to Michael Jordan, but at the end of the day, Canelo right now, he is the clear number 1 pound-for-pound fighter, and they don't like that. So it is what it is. But right now, that's just the way it is. Unless Terrence Crawford gets a win over Errol Spence Jr., or unless maybe Usyk gets a win over Fury, or maybe Fury gets a win over Usyk, right now, that's not changing. It is what it is. So anyways, that's pretty much all I got to say in this video. Thank you all so much for watching. And overall, I will talk to you later. But I guess overall, I should bring up one more point. And that is, kind of the thing that Eddie Reynoso said. And basically, he was talking about Shakur Stevenson. Here's overall my point with that. And Shakur Stevenson is a person that somewhat is very similar to Floyd Mayweather or Terrence Bud Crawford, to where he's extremely slick. He has very good feet. When it comes down to it, he's a very defensively responsible fighter. He is what you would call one of those elite, slickster African-American fighters, or whatever you want to call them, when it comes out, whatever, they feel comfortable being labeled as. But when it comes down to, like I said, Jamal Charlo, I just don't see him as one of those fighters. Maybe I could see a little bit of an argument for Demetrius Bivol Andrade, but Charlo is not one of those fighters. And I'm sorry, but Demetrius Bivol, in my opinion, he's even a bigger threat than what Demetrius Andrade is. I'm sorry, but Andrade, like I said, I think he's a very decent boxer. But every time that I've seen him, I've just never been nearly as impressed with him as what many other people have acclaimed him to be. He's a very decent boxer. I could maybe see him giving Canelo certain problems, but more than likely I see that fight ending up just like the Caleb Plant or Billy Joe Saunders fight. Maybe him winning some rounds, but all in all, Canelo more than likely getting to him. But, it is what it is. That's not me saying I would not want to see those fights. And if Demetrius Andrade versus David Benavidez fight does end up happening, and the winner of that, yes, Canelo will have to face them. Otherwise, he's going to get a lot of backlash, including from me, so we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you later. We will see where Mr. Canelo Alvarez goes from here. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all later.